Hello and welcome to the Garden Freedom Series, the complimentary training series that helps you cultivate a successful vegetable garden wherever you are. My name is Stacy Murphy, known to many as Brooklyn's Backyard Farmer, and it's my goal to help millions of people enjoy the incredibly satisfying, delicious, and nourishing experience of growing healthy food. Now, I've trained thousands of growers all around the world how to get the most out of their gardens. That means more fresh-picked organic vegetables, even if all you have is 100 square feet of growing space and less than an hour each week. My passion is to remove any obstacles so that you can take part in one of the most nourishing activities in the world. In this video, we're talking about growing double the vegetable harvest in half the space. And it doesn't take much space to grow all of your own vegetables. Just an area about the size of a medium-sized car. That's it. Growing food, when you know how to do it right, like I'll be showing you, can make you self-reliant, healthy, and free. That's why I'm calling this the Garden Freedom Series. You're free from wondering if your food is grown ethically and if it's safe. You're free to make decisions that work for you. You know exactly how your food is grown, and so you have access to fresh, organic, nutrient-dense, and inexpensive food that you know is toxin-free. You have the power to nourish yourself, to get healthy, to grow your own medicine, and to live a wonderful life. And bonus points, you're doing something great for the environment. In video 1, and that link is above this video, you discovered the first step of creating a successful garden, how to create smart, actionable, fun goals so you can focus on what's important, keep it simple, and eliminate any of the unnecessary garden work. Now, let's talk about how to double the vegetable harvest in half the space. The secret? Location, location, location. And no matter how experienced a grower you are, it's good to revisit this lesson each year because you know what happens when growing conditions are right? Plants want to grow. You can sit back, watch, and let the seeds, the sun, and the soil do most of the work for you. That's the magic of nature. And you might be shocked at how little you have to do in your garden when you pick the right place to plant those vegetables. That's how you set yourself up for easy wins in the garden, and that's what I want for you. Planting in the wrong spot and then just hoping it's going to be okay is the number one mistake that I see beginners make. Very smart people make that mistake, and I don't want that to be you. Now, some of us, we have to make the most out of the growing conditions that we have, and I totally get that. But if you plant in completely the wrong place and just simply hope it's going to be okay, I predict you're going to love and nurture those plants, spend lots of time and attention, but you're not going to get any food, and that can be heartbreaking. So in this video, we'll be going through the 5 keys to a successful vegetable garden space. Before we get started, I wanted to show you how simply evaluating these 5 keys in your garden space can help you double your harvest. Yes, merely planting vegetables in the best possible conditions can help you double your harvest. Here's how you set yourself up for garden success. And if you're a more experienced grower, I know you sometimes like to test the boundaries of what's possible, so you're going to appreciate this quick harvest story. So this is Foxtrot, my garden in Brooklyn that I introduced you to in the first video. This is where I was growing 30 to 50 pounds of produce weekly for 20 weeks, feeding 6 families in under 2 hours of gardening time each week. But there was this tree that kept getting bigger each year, and as it stole a little bit more of my sunshine every year, I began to run some experiments. One year, I grew cabbage in an area that was half in full sun and half in the dappled shade of that tree. And then fast forward 60 days, each of the cabbage heads that was planted in the sun was over 2 pounds and ready for harvest. Some of them were close to 3 pounds, and they arrived just like the seed packets said they would in 60 days. I still had half of the cabbage in the ground, however, and those remaining heads were in the shade. They were receiving just 4 hours of sun each day. So after another 60 days, 120 days total after I planted these cabbages, the rest of them were ready, and each of the heads that were grown in the shade were significantly smaller, each about 3/4 of a pound. So if this cabbage in the shade was the first time I grew anything, I would think I was a total garden failure because the seed package told me they'd be ready in 60 days. Here it was 120 days, and they were so tiny. I grew about 16 pounds of cabbage in the sunny area, and in that same size space, I only grew 4.5 pounds of cabbage in the shade. So depending on the way you run the math, it's nearly quadruple the yield or nearly double the yield in half the space. So can you see how growing just 1 foot over meant all the difference? And for reference, I ran similar experiments with all kinds of greens, and faster growing greens like arugula and lettuce, they did a little better in the shade in terms of timing, but still half the harvest. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd rather find a better space with more sun than try a shady space like this. I'm not a fan of watering, waiting, and tiny harvests. I'd start asking some neighbors for sunny space. It's better than hoping for some food. So we're going to go through the checklist to ensure your growing space has what it takes to grow food in just a moment. Before we do, let's get clear on what you can grow in these small spaces. And you might be shocked how much you can grow in a small space. When I lived in Brooklyn, I had no yard, so I went vertical with a container garden and grew all my greens, herbs, and hot peppers. That's it. Greens take up the least amount of space, so they are perfect for those of you with really small spaces. And now that I live in San Diego, I have a small yard, and this is a 6-foot by 3-foot box, and I share a couple of these with my housemates. So when the growing conditions are right, it takes about half of one of these boxes to grow all my leafy greens, 21 meals a week, including my greens for breakfast. So all your greens in a small space. But what happens if conditions aren't quite right? Well, during the winter, this garden box only gets about 4 hours of sunlight, and the sun is really low in the sky, and it's a little cooler at night too, and so everything slows way down. So in the winter, it takes this entire box to grow all my greens. So when conditions are right, I'm growing in half the space. What about the other vegetables, right? So when the growing conditions are warmer in the summer, one of these boxes will feed me all of my tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, basil, and parsley for the year. And then another one of these boxes feeds me all my cucumbers, my squash, and my root vegetables for the year. And I can't forget to show you my indoor lights where I grow a continuous supply of pea and sunflower shoots. So if you're counting and adding all of this up, you can grow most of your vegetables for the year in under 100 square feet of space. That's about the area of a mid-size car. I mentioned I've taught thousands of people all around the world how to grow vegetables. So it is possible, and you can do this too, as long as you know how to recognize when the growing conditions are right, or if you have more experience, how you can start to bend growing conditions more towards what you want. So let's dive in and assess how your growing space stacks up to ideal conditions. If you haven't already, go ahead and download my ebook below this video to get started, and we're going to go through the checklist, 5 keys to a successful vegetable garden space. Our goal here is to create a great habitat for your vegetable plants to thrive. So what do vegetable plants want most? They photosynthesize, so they need sunlight, or grow lamps if you're growing indoors. And vegetable and herb plants are very specific about how much sunlight they want. Vegetable and herb plants will reward you with lots of growth when they get 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. When you go to plant stores, you'll see tags that say things like low light, medium light, and high light, or you might see tags that say partial shade, partial sun, or full sun. Vegetables like this tomato tag here typically say full sun. Vegetables thrive with a minimum of 6 hours of sunlight. That's what full sun means. Medium light is 4 to 6 hours, and some vegetables can grow under medium light. But remember, I showed you earlier that my harvest was cut significantly when I tried to grow in 4 hours of sunlight. If you want easy wins and lots of food, find at least 6 hours of sunlight. I would love for you to feel really successful. And then there's low light, 2 to 4 hours of sunlight. This is where vegetables pretty much wither and die. They may sprout really well, but they won't grow into mature plants. All right, so when you look at your space, you may notice it seems sunny or it seems shady, but how do you easily quantify exactly how many hours of sunlight it receives? If you know without a doubt that you get 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, you can skip forward in this video now. For the rest of us, how do we calculate if we're receiving enough sun or not? Another way to say 6 to 8 hours of sunlight is that we're looking for areas with less than 16 hours of shade. So what we're actually doing when we measure the hours of sunlight is measuring shadows instead. Shadows are consistently on the move from sun up to sundown and throughout the season. You could track a whole lot of data to find out exactly how many hours of sun each part of your growing space gets every day of the growing season, but that would be a colossal waste of time and effort. So as part of my courses, I teach how to collect useful data to make informed decisions to help you grow more food. Otherwise, you're collecting a whole bunch of useless data and you're just wasting your time, and I don't want that for anyone. So I use a super simple process to track shadows. I walk outside and I simply observe the shadows. But there are just a few tricks to knowing when to look, how to record that data, and how to interpret that data. And even if you think you know how much sun your growing space gets, this exercise is quick and it may surprise you. So let's run through an example. The camera on our phone makes this process really easy. On a sunny day, simply set your alarm to go off every hour. When the alarm goes off, go outside, take a photo of the garden spot that you want to test. And here's my current garden boxes at 11 a.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m. in the winter. What do you notice? Remember I mentioned that in the winter it takes me twice as much space to grow my greens as in the summer? This is the big reason why. Temperatures are pretty ideal here in the winter, but with only 4 hours of sunlight, everything is growing about half as fast. And as long as you're home on a sunny day, this doesn't take you but a couple minutes to do this exercise. Take the photos and then simply scroll through them and count up the hours of sunlight. So here's a couple tips. If you look outside when the alarm goes off and there's no sun, no need to take a photo. If you haven't planted a garden yet, you can mark the area you want to plant and watch how the shadows fall across that area.
And if part of the area is in sun in one photo and then completely in sun in the next photo, you might count that as a half hour instead of a full hour. And if you have a really large property and want to map the shadows across your whole yard, you can draw everything out and then color in the shadows you see with colored pencils each hour or every couple of hours. And as you map your site, don't worry if you think you can't draw. Your drawing only has to make sense to you. And some of my students use gridded paper, like in my template below, to get their measurements as accurate as possible. Other students use an aerial image and draw over the top of it. Whatever makes sense to you to get the data you need to locate your garden beds. And you'll learn so much about your site if you make this exercise a priority to discover the sun pattern on your site. Okay, so that exercise is simple and fun, but there's one important trick. When do you do this? Spaceship Earth is orbiting around the sun on an angle, so you can find the number of hours of sunlight is going to change throughout the season and throughout the years as trees and bushes grow around you. Ideally, you would do this 4 times a year, March 21st, June 21st, September 21st, and December 21st. Those are the solstices and equinoxes marking the 4 seasons. Now, why do I recommend tracking shadows on all 4 of these days? Well, you might discover the place you wanted to grow vegetables doesn't get enough sun, or that you have less growing space than you realized in one of those seasons. Or you may also discover more growing space you never expected. Yes, there may be a prime growing space right under your nose that you might not recognize until you do this exercise. So no matter how much experience you have, take the data and find out. Here's an example of finding unexpected growing space. Take a look here at the difference in the 12 noon shadows on the summer and winter solstices. Underneath this big tree in June is a big shadow. The sun is right over your head. Now, look at December 21st, the winter solstice. The green is basically showing the area of the tree canopy overhead, but it's not necessarily where the shadow falls in the winter, and there's no leaves. The tree is so tall that shadow falls all the way over on the neighbor's yard. And what you'll notice is that the area right under the tree is a prime area for growing vegetables because it gets lots of sunlight. What you'll also notice is that the 6-foot fence at the south of the site puts out a large shadow because the sun is so low in the sky, making a big part of the site unusable as a growing space. So in the early spring, I grow a lot of lettuces under that tree, but as the solstice approaches, the area under that tree becomes a little less usable. As fall and winter approach, maybe I want to grow some winter greens in a mini greenhouse or cold frame. I'm not going to locate my greenhouse anywhere near that fence, right? Because it's in shadow all day long. I'm going to grow under that tree. And for beginners, I would recommend you focus on the basics your first season and then start to think about projects like cold frames and greenhouses at the end of your season to start extending your season. Remember, you want a minimum of 6 hours of sunlight if you want your garden to be easy. And no, you cannot get too much sun. Just check out these giant vegetables in Alaska where they have 19-hour sunny days sometimes. Holy cabbage, right? But you can have too much heat, which is the second key to a successful vegetable garden space, is to understand the temperatures. If you remember just 3 temperatures, you know quite a bit about growing vegetables. Most vegetables don't like freezing temperatures. There are some that will hibernate below freezing, like garlic, carrots, and spinach, but they sure don't grow much at those really cold temperatures. So look up your first and last frost dates to measure how long your growing season is, and while you're checking those temperatures, mark on your calendar when typical nighttime temperatures are between 50 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, because these are ideal conditions for most vegetables to thrive. Yes, there are cool weather crops that grow below the ideal range, and hot weather crops that grow above these temperatures. So knowing when you cross the threshold is good. You can adjust your expectations of what is going to thrive. Now, I have students successfully growing vegetables at low and high temperatures. The ebook below this video gives you some ideas for how to adjust your local conditions and create microclimates, and I go into much more detail in my longer Grow Your Own Vegetables course on this topic. Now, these keys really are in order of importance, by the way. If you have sun and heat figured out, these last 3 keys, they might be really easy. So the third key to a successful vegetable garden space is drawing the boundary around an area that you will grow food, a dedicated space. And this is not just about claiming your territory, it's about building the right biology to grow food, whether you choose soil or containers or even water-based systems. You might think you know your plants because you see them every day, but there's a whole root system ecosystem that you don't see, and you want to cultivate a thriving biology in your space. All right, the fourth key to a successful vegetable garden is to put your garden efforts right in your daily line of sight. If you see it every day, there's no way you can forget it's there or accidentally neglect it. Now, even though plants don't need a lot of attention when conditions are right, it's important to notice what's happening. And at a minimum, if you check your garden just once a week, you're going to notice any signs of pest or disease before they become a big problem. The fifth key to a successful vegetable garden is moisture. This is at the bottom of the checklist because it's easy to automate and ensure your garden is getting just the right amount of water. I show people how to do this in my longer course. If you can check all the keys off this list, you're going to find great ease in your garden because you'll be working with nature and your plants have what they need to thrive. Now, people ask this question all the time. What do you do if you have to choose between sunlight and putting the garden someplace easy for you to see? Pick the sunlight and then create a daily reminder to check the garden that is in your daily path, like a post-it on the mirror or on the fridge. Alternatively, if your garden has to be indoors, invest in grow lamps so your plants get the light they need. Now, if you don't have ideal conditions, you can get creative. For example, I know for some of you, ensuring 6 hours of sunlight on your garden is the hardest part. So here are a few quick ideas. I'm a city mouse, so I've tried it all. And while it's the most important key, there are many ways to find more light. First idea, what about a movable planting bed on wheels, essentially a large container? Don't make the sunlight come to you, just move your planting bed so it can soak up that sun. And as an added benefit, if you have a space that heats up above 85 degrees regularly, you could find some shade too if you need to. All right, so the second idea, we've been observing shadows on the ground, but you could also take photos of walls to see if they get enough sunlight. I showed you how I grew all my greens in this container garden in Brooklyn. Vertical gardens don't require much space at all. And a special trick for you container gardeners, those containers can get hot and dry real quick, so midday sun and heat may not be as preferable as sun at dawn or dusk, depending on how hot and dry your location is. And I talk about container gardens in more depth in my longer courses. The last idea for those of you without growing space of your own. If you're serious about growing your own food, perhaps you enroll a neighbor in your plan, offer to grow food in their space, and share the harvest. It's a win-win. Remember, this is literally how Foxtrot was born in a complete stranger's yard in Brooklyn. I went to farmers markets, I stood on street corners with flyers, and I yelled, "Hey, do you have a yard? Can I farm it?" And it worked. There are people who love to grow food, and there are people who are not interested at all in growing, but they do love eating fresh food and will gladly hand over the maintenance of their yard to you. On 100 square feet of someone else's property, you can easily grow for you and that homeowner, plus have some extra. In my longer Grow Your Own Vegetables course, I go into more detail about how to share yards if that's something you're interested in. I have contract templates for you to use and best practices I've learned over the years. I'm really excited to share the details of that course with you later in the series. And several of my past students are using my contract templates to successfully borrow yards.
And I'm hoping that teens and adults who are watching this and interested in growing food will start converting lawns to food production everywhere. Goodbye mowing lawns, hello delicious homegrown food. Imagine transforming the definition of the local food system, growing food right in your own neighborhood. And people are doing this everywhere, and so can you. You can do this. Now you know the 5 keys to ensuring your garden space will produce abundant vegetable harvests with ease. And if I can find space all over Brooklyn in one of the densest cities in the country, I'm sure you can too. What I hope you take away from this video is when you find ways to work with nature, you'll find that plants grow all on their own. You can even go on vacation and your garden will grow without you. I don't know about you, but I'm busy, so it's nice to know that my plants are going to be just fine without me. So what action steps are you going to take to ensure that you have optimized the growing space where you are? Share those comments below this video, and remember, growing just 1 foot over may double your vegetable harvest if you get it right. Please share this video with beginning growers too. In my experience, students have told me that this video has helped them avoid some major heartaches, planting a whole bunch of food in the wrong spot and not getting the harvest that they want. So please share. The next video in this series will become available in a couple days, so keep an eye out for an email from me. And even if you don't see that email, just come on back here. We'll be waiting for you, and there'll be a link above that will be active. And in that video, my inner garden geek wants to tell you that it's my favorite video because I get to crunch more numbers. And don't worry, you don't have to like crunching numbers. That's what I'm here for. I'm going to share how to turn a couple dollars into weekly harvest. That means you can enjoy organic vegetables for just pennies. And I'll also share which vegetables give you the biggest return on your investment. You're going to want to join me. So for now, scroll down and please give me a big thumbs up if you like this video. More importantly though, please leave a comment. Let me know if I were to visit your growing space 3 years from now, What would that look like, and how would your life have changed? So please post your comments below, and I'll see you on the next video.